So, the 7 things men are afraid of in relationships and what you can do about them. So, a little bit about my background. I'm a marital therapist. I've been helping couples make better relationships for 35 years. When I first started, all my clients used to be amazed that, first of all, I was a man, and secondly, how young I was. Because I was actually younger than all of my clients. I've now reached the stage where I'm older than all of my clients. So our topic is the thing that men are afraid of in relationships. And my mentor, and I think every man needs a mentor, is a Jungian therapist. His name is James Hollis. He's 80 years old. In fact, he's probably 82 by now. Despite having cancer and being treated for radiotherapy, he didn't miss one day with his clients. So, I mean, he's a pretty extraordinary man. And his famous book is called Under Saturn's Shadow, The Wounding and Healing of Men. And I would recommend that book. But he talks about the secrets that men have that they actually sometimes are not even prepared to admit to themselves. And when I read these 7 fears, there was one that just hit me between the eyes so strongly. And he says that men's lives are essentially governed by fear. Men's lives are essentially governed by fear. And I knew that was incredibly true because if you look at everything that is aimed at men, it's about fear. You watch every action movie from John Wayne on to the most contemporary hero, the one thing they never express, beyond possibly for a millisecond, is fear. We see these men go through these incredibly frightening experiences. The whole archetype of the hero is all about facing fear. All the myths and the fairy tales, which are the combined wisdom of all our ancestors, they have just 2 messages for us. At the very core, the 2 messages are, be brave and keep going. And it is because our lives are essentially governed by fear. So, who do we fear? Well, the first thing we fear is other men. Has anybody heard of Michael Meade, who's one of the founders? We've got one person there. One of the founders of the men's movement. He now is working in a much bigger field. He has a podcast called Living Myth. And I loved his quote, which is, a man at his first men's gathering asks himself 2 questions. Is somebody going to get killed, and is it me? And there is a certain amount of truth in that. You know, you are incredibly brave. You've come to a conference with 299 other men, so you're doing well. But there's something that we fear even more than other men. I think you can possibly guess what it might be. It is women, and particularly women that we're in close and loving relationships. I did a podcast with the psychotherapist Avram Weiss, and I called the podcast, Why Men Withdraw When Women Get Angry. Because you can have the biggest, strongest man who is, a bouncer for the most horrible club, and he'll have no trouble dealing with other men. But if a woman gets angry, he's about that size. So Avram Weiss wrote this book called Hidden in Plain Sight, How Men's Fear of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. And I had been working with couples for 35 years, and he asks a question or in fact actually points out when he has a couple in the room, a man and a woman, he started doing something that I realized I hadn't done in 35 years because it was such a confronting thing to say. And I think possibly when it comes to my therapy style, I'm not the most confronting person. I'm a gentler person. But he says he actually, when he sees a man who's afraid of his wife, actually say it, "Are you afraid of your wife?" And I mean, this is almost the ultimate taboo to say to a man that he's afraid of his wife. And he found this huge opening up that once you could actually say, or these men could say, "I'm afraid of my wife," all of these opportunities and possibilities opened up. And actually, I said it to one of my male clients the next day, and it was like a flower opening up to actually be able to say this. So Avram Weiss has 7 things that men are afraid of in relationships. And when I looked at them, I thought, my gosh, these are so true. I've been talking with some of my co-workshop leaders, some of the people who are going to be giving speeches, and they were trying to guess what the 7 things were. And they got them with like that, because we recognize them deep down. So what I thought I would do is I bring these 7 things that men are afraid of in relationships, help us think about why this might be, and I've come up with 7 things that we can do to combat them. So I don't know if you immediately, hopefully you're at this precise second thinking, what could these 7 things that men are afraid of in relationships be? Maybe just for a second, think, if you were going to be answering that question yourself, what some of them might be. So actually close your eyes for a second and see if you can come up with 1 or 2 things. So, nice deep breath. If you're feeling a bit of fear and anxiety, where is it in your body? And let's just breathe into that. Right. So, hopefully, you're going to have 1 or 2 things. So, what are men most afraid of and when it comes to an intimate relationship? We're going to start with the ones that are possibly going to come to the top of mind, and we're then slowly but surely going to go deeper and deeper with each one of them. So, the first one is being dominated, or even worse, controlled. Did anybody think of that one? Excellent. So there's something about men that we sort of have to get into an order between the person at the top and all the way down. When we were talking in the leaders' conference, there was this sense of men having a need for hierarchy. And in fact, we all started fighting about that because we were, in a sense, jostling on this particular position. But being dominated or controlled by a woman, I mean, it sort of can feel like something essential has been taken away from you, that the myth of the open road and the king of the roads is incredibly powerful, and the idea to be dominated or controlled, and it can actually go down to something not particularly big. Has anybody heard of a guy called Matthew Frey, who wrote a very famous blog post that went viral called My Wife Divorced Me Because I Left the Glass on the Sink Rather Than Put It in the Dishwasher. And as you can possibly guess, it wasn't just about the glass. And part of it for him would have been the sense of, if she can tell me where to put the glass, I'm going to be dominated or controlled. And so, although he possibly wasn't conscious of this particular glass issue, it was going into this material. Wow, the next one. I can feel a little sort of feeling in my gut as I'm about to write it down. It's horrible. Being entrapped by a woman. You know, we want them to seduce us, but we're terrified that once they've got us, that we're going to be entrapped. And you can see how the two of things actually fit together. You know, that sense, I hear it over and over again, you know, that you wanted me, we had lots of sex together, now we're here in the relationship, you've taken away the sex, I'm entrapped here. Anybody get being entrapped by a woman? No? It's a one here, brilliant. It's a very complex thing. We want women, we need women, we desperately want them, but we're frightened that they're going to entrap us. The next thing, and I think possibly this one is going to be no surprise, we're frightened that we're going to fail to protect or provide. There is something deep in the male psyche that say we have to provide and protect for our family. I mean, it goes into every single one of our bones. So, whereas it's perfectly acceptable for a woman to be provided for or protected, we live in an age of equality, thank goodness. But yet, somewhere in our ancestral bones, if we can't provide or protect our woman, the family, the children, there is something essentially lost to us. And we know it. I mean, nearly every one of these action movies, John Wayne is coming in to protect a woman. That's the arena that he's going to be working on. And we still have it today. You know, we have to bring that money in. We have to be ready to stand up and be counted. I think these ones are all ones we're going to be very conscious of. If I've done difficult ones, we're now coming to the really tough ones. Number 4, we're frightened of women's emotions. How many people got that one? Come on, all put your hands up. I was talking to Robert, who is the author of No More Mr. Nice Guy, who's going to be speaking to you tomorrow, and he was trying to predict what they were going to be. And in fact, he's going to be talking on one particular woman's emotions that men are frightened of, but I'm talking about all of them. He's going to be talking about how they're frightened of women's sexuality, their sexual desires. But I'm interested in we're frightened of, the biggest one is women's anger. Men go quiet when women get angry. They flee, they might fight back, but the fighting back is very much from the small boy, it's not fair. And Robert was telling me how he has a tiny Mexican wife. She loves him so much, she has his initials tattooed on each of her thighs. I mean, can you imagine a more loving act than that? She's not going anywhere. She loves him, and he loves her. But she can do this expression in her mouth where her mouth goes down a little bit. You know, it's just a tiny little movement. And despite having done many years of men's work, having written one of the most important books on the subject of men dealing with women and being no more Mr. Nice Guy, something deep inside of him feels a visceral fear and pain. You know, she's going to leave me, I'm going to be abandoned. And it's just a downturn. He knows that she's going to get, she's angry, he's done something, they're going to have a row, they're going to get through it. But at that moment, it feels incredibly terrifying. So we feel in some way we are responsible for women's emotions and we need to rescue them from them. We need to manage them. I'm here to tell you that trying to manage a woman's emotions is, number one, a pointless task. Number two, it's going to make her even more angry. And despite the fact you know those two things, you're still going to do it. Fear not, because I've got some ways of dealing with it in the 7 things that you can do differently. But it's not just their anger, their sadness, their disappointment. All of these things can touch us really quite dramatically. And as Robert said, I think you can possibly guess it's not to do with his feelings about his wife. It's not her. It's some mother energy that's coming up. And this sort of existential sense of feelings is going back right the way to when we were children. Because when you are a small child, I mean, if your mother abandons you and leaves you, or she doesn't want to, but she does die, I mean that if the cub of a lion or a wolf or something like that, their mother dies, the children, the pups, the kittens die. And it is that existential. So when women's emotions overwhelm us, it is back to that deep inner child kind of material. So we have being dominated or controlled, being entrapped by a woman, failure to protect or provide for your family, women's emotions. Number 5, being inadequate. We have to have all the answers. We need to have a dick that's 9 inches long, is as solid as an oak, and will go on forever. And if we fail to provide that, we're going to be inadequate. If we don't provide for our families, if other men see that we haven't got our shit together, we're going to feel inadequate. And actually, it's not the end of the world if men find out we're inadequate, but if your wife finds out you're inadequate, we're getting deeper now. This is one that absolutely terrifies us. Our own femininity. By the way, if my spelling is appalling, please forgive me. What do I mean by our own femininity? You have to be able to own your own femininity. You have to be able to own the what Jungians would call the anima inside us. And anima is things like intuition, caring, being connected to other people, being connected to our emotions. And one of the reasons why we're so frightened of women is because we outsource a lot of our material to women. I mean, most men end up in my therapy office. Can anybody guess why? Well, either they've been left or their women have sent them saying, if you don't go, I am going to leave you. You know, women are responsible for men's emotions. They will tell you how to deal with your mother. If you're having a trouble with your boss at work or your colleagues, they will tell you these things. You know, if you're feeling down, they will ask you about them. They will listen. We're incredibly reliant on them. But we have all these capacities in ourselves. And, you know, the task that we have is actually getting in touch with these parts of ourselves and coming into balance, so that we're not just in balance because we've got a woman doing this kind of work. We're actually balanced inside ourselves. That's incredibly appealing to women, that when you get a man who is balanced. But you have to be able to admit to your own vulnerability, your own openness. You're not actually waiting for somebody else to be open and vulnerable, and then you can pile in and be open and vulnerable beside them. I mean, so many of my male clients they want recognition from women. They want the woman to actually tell them they're doing okay. They can't actually do that job for themselves. They sort of know it, that they're doing okay, but they can't actually do it for themselves. We're outsourcing it. We have the abilities to hold all of these things. We have the ability to hold our power and also our vulnerability. But often we're terrified of our vulnerability because if we haven't done our stuff, we're frightened that it's going to actually overwhelm us. We're going to become inadequate. We're not going to be able to provide. And it's pretty frightening stuff. So, I think maybe you can possibly guess what the last thing is that we're most fundamentally afraid of, but we're not actually going to speak about unless we're put on the rack and somebody's turning the wheel to make us. We're frightened of being abandoned. I can't tell you how many men come to me and they want to save their marriage, but they're terrified that if they actually go for it, that their partner might turn around and say, nah, and they're abandoned. They would much rather get the abandonment in first. Think about it. Has there been a time when you have left a relationship because you're frightened that she might abandon you first, and somehow that seems less terrifying? I'm not going to... I wasn't going to ask for a share of hands, but we have got somebody who was brave enough to admit that. 2 people. Is there anything here that surprises you? I'll give them the 7 things again. Being dominated or controlled, being entrapped by a woman, failure to protect or provide for your family, women's emotions, being inadequate, our own femininity and abandonment. Were there any surprises there? I think we know and we recognize all of these things. So I think we've got somebody who'd like to say something. So... No, I'm not hearing you. Have we got a microphone? Is it going to work?
Hello?
Yeah. Perfect.
May you elaborate on the entrapped, like the second or third?
Yeah.
Thing?
What would you like to know about entrapment?
Yeah, if you can describe what it is, or how do you mean?
So entrapped means that you have got a loss of control. I mean, you're not literally in a cage, but it feels like it, that you can't move one way or the other. You have 3 children. You have to provide for them. Remember, we must provide and protect, and yet we're feeling that you'll find some of the solutions in a moment, but you're feeling that you can't move left or right. You're feeling that nobody's actually interested. Nobody's got your back. You are trapped. Does that explain it? I had somebody else who wanted to ask something.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Do these also apply to women, so women's fears?
Let's go through them. I don't think they feel they don't particularly want to be controlled, but being dominated would not be one of the things. Women are often concerned about men's emotions too, because men's emotions can also be very threatening. They're certainly concerned about being abandoned. So, I mean, women are not short of their own fears, but I think it's a good thing to actually just concentrate on our fears of women today. So, what can you do about it?
Hello?
What you can do about it is we can face the fear and do it. It might be frightening, but hey-ho, we're men, and we remember those 2 important messages, and they're not just for when the building is burning down, that are in all the fairy tales. Be courageous, and this is the bit that we find really difficult when it comes to a problem with women, and keep going. I can't tell you how many, half of getting people to be better at dealing with conflict in my room is just getting them to stay in the crucible of conflict for a bit longer. So instead of fleeing, or closing down, that they just stay in that relationship, in that conflict for just a little bit longer. Earlier this year, I went to a men's conference in the UK as a participant. And I was... Sorry, somebody wants to ask a question.
Ich bin mir jetzt im Moment nicht ganz sicher, ob ich noch auf gleicher Höhe bin, weil ich höre schwer und ich habe das nicht so ganz mitbekommen, aber was mir am Herzen...
To what extent or where are men responsible for their own lives? I mean, I'm not so much concerned about the question of how women scare us or how we are afraid of women, but where I'm interested in the areas in the fields where we scare ourselves, where we make ourselves afraid. I mean, when I'm ready to assume my own responsibility and to make decisions for myself.
So my German is B1 level, so I think what you're asking me is if a man, does a man have to be responsible for his own emotions? Could somebody translate the question for me, please?
What a man responsible for in marriage, what responsibility they have to take?
Yes, men have to be responsible for all this stuff. This is at the very core of this. What I'm now looking at, the 7 things you can do about it. It's all about, instead of actually outsourcing to women and actually being concerned about women, what women think, it's actually getting our own stuff together and dealing with it. And the first thing is we need to face the fear and look other men in the eye. We need to face the fear and do it. I went to a workshop in the UK, and this was 10 other men, And I'm so used to doing workshops, either as a participant or giving them. And the way I start every workshop, and basically every workshop I've ever been in, is everybody stands in a circle, they hold hands, and they look each other in the eyes and look and see who the other people are who've come here. And I was taught, when I was, giving feedback to the people who were leading the workshop, I was saying, I was really surprised we didn't look at each other at the very beginning. And they said to me that it's actually too threatening for men to look each other in the eyes. So we have to face our fears. I'd like, actually, at this precise moment, you all to turn to the person who's sitting next to you and just really look them in the eye. It wasn't so bad, was it? And that's what fear is. We think it's going to be difficult and painful and hard, but actually when we face it, it's not so bad. So that's the first one. We need to face our fears. The reason I am here today is I'm here to help us break the silence. It's okay to admit that our wives sometimes terrify the living daylights out of us. But we need to speak our emotional truth. I'm just going to say that again. We need to speak our emotional truth. And most men, first of all, they haven't got the first idea what their emotional truth is because they've never asked themselves. They're spending most of their time trying to manage somebody else. So what our truth is, and to actually say it, even if it's going to upset our partner, we have to say it, and they will be so pleased with you if you do. The next thing we need to do is to make better male friendships. And you are 3 million miles ahead because you are here. You are interested in making relationships with other men. Because if our only resource is other women, so not other women, to women, it makes us very vulnerable. If your wife is angry with you, who else are you going to talk to? Now, your wife has 300 friends that she's going to talk to, but maybe, and her mother as well. I mean, you're not going to be talking, well, I'd be really thrilled if you were talking to your father about it, but we need, the one thing that every man needs is more friends. And they need male contact as well. We need men hugs. And, my invitation to you after this workshop is not to say to somebody, would you like a hug? Because that seems like, here I am, the big man offering the hug to you, the poor inadequate person who needs a hug. And it's not, can I have a hug? Because then you suddenly think, oh, I'm the poor inadequate person. The way you say it is, would you like to share a hug? Because the hug you're giving and receiving at the same time. So a little bit of homework for you. After this workshop, you've got a break. Use the break to go up to another man and say, would you like to share a hug? And I don't want it to be a in-out. I want you to be long enough to just, take 3 deep breaths together, just to relax into that sense of the other men, and they're here to hold us and support us. I'll come to some more questions in a moment.
Would you like to write down these 7 points to
Okay. So, the 7 things that you can do is face your fear. Admit it. There are times when your wife terrifies you, or her emotions terrify you. You can speak your truth. when you have this particular expression on your face, I feel three years old inside, and I'm absolutely terrified. I know it's not about you, it's about me, but when you do that, I feel terrified. That's speaking your emotional truth. More male friends. And if you're not in some kind of men's support group where you talk about your emotions to other men, start one yourself and invite 3 or 4 other guys here today to join the group. It's going to be one of the best things you can do for your mental health ever. I don't know if you're aware that I am doing a workshop this afternoon about the mother wound. And what you can do is you can leave the mother both physically and psychologically. I can't tell you how many men are still worried about pleasing their mother, sometimes when she's been dead for 20 years. You know, how many people are doctors or lawyers or whatever because that's what their mother wanted them to do. They would have much rather been a musician or an artist or something, but their mother wanted them to do it. And all these years later, they're still doing that bloody profession because their mother wanted. So you need to leave the mother. Then I've got some things, practical things that I teach. Right, what number are we up to? 5. If you want the closest to a magic bullet that you're ever going to receive on dealing with women's emotions, I'm about to give it to you now. When a woman is angry or upset, we feel that we have to fix it or rescue it or manage it. And, you know, that is a terrifying task. You don't have to do that. All you need to do is reflect back. How do you reflect back? You just summarize what you've just heard. No comments, no editorializing. So if she says, I'm angry with you because you left the glass on the side rather than putting it in the dishwasher, you say, you're angry with me because I didn't put the glass away. It's as simple as that. You acknowledge the feelings and you're summarizing what you've just heard. If you want to see it in detail, if you put my name, Andrew G. Marshall, into YouTube and you put reflecting back, you'll find me demonstrating it. She will then say a whole load more things, and you reflect back those. You tell her the 3 most loving words in the English language. These are not, I love you. They are, tell me more. If you say to a woman, tell me more, she will love you forever. Because she is terrified that you're not going to listen to her. This reflecting back is showing that you're listening to her. Tell me more says, I love you so much, I'm prepared to hear even more reasons why you're angry with me. That's reflecting back. And while you're doing this, you can go for the next one, which is the golden gap. What I'm doing with the reflecting back is I'm buying myself time. And the gap between between the trigger and what I automatically do is like a millisecond. I don't actually consciously choose. Going back to Robert and his small Mexican wife whose mouth drops down and he's terrified, the time between her mouth dropping down and his feeling of terror is like a millisecond. You can begin to see when I'm reflecting back and I'm saying, tell me more, is there more? I'm buying myself time. So I'm not doing the automatic response. Think of it a bit like a train leaving a station. The trigger is the guard blowing the whistle, the train leaves. And once the train has left, have you ever seen a train come back into the station? No. The train is your automatic reactions. The trigger, you flee, you fight, you rationalize. And you don't want to do that. It sort of worked when you were a kid, but it stopped working 20 years ago. You need different things. You need to reflect back, for example. You need to accept her emotions. Every fiber wants you to not do it. But if you can actually reflect back, you can take a deep breath, you can actually choose what your alternative is. Instead of doing those automatic things, you could do another element of the golden gap, and you've bought yourself a bit of time. You could ask a curious question. So instead of fixing, you could actually say, how can I help you with that? What do you want from me? Do you want a hug? Do you want to be listened to? Do you want a solution? So you can actually ask what it is she wants from you. You don't assume, it's a curious question. The last thing that we can do, and this I'm going to say in a sentence, and it's basically what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. But, this project of dealing with women's emotions or not being afraid of women's emotions is a lifetime task. So this is the task of every man, in fact, every human being. We have to activate from within what we did not receive from without. I'll say that again. We need to activate from within what we did not receive from without. So I came from a family that never talked about emotions. We didn't have emotions in our family. Well, I've spent the whole of my life, my career, trying to go against that, to find those emotions, to actually find the capacity within myself to go out and get what I didn't get. I didn't get held by my father, but I came involved with the men's movement and found men that would hold me. I activated from within what I couldn't get from without. So, ultimately that's what our task is. And the wonderful thing is you are all on this journey together. And it is really brilliant to see so many of you here. Are there any questions? I think I've got one down here at the front.
Hello. How you hold it from outside when you don't get the love of your mother?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important that you actually say that to yourself, that I felt an unloved child. So number one, you're actually accepting it. Number two, you're beginning to think about why you were an unloved child. We think we are how we are treated. So if your mother doesn't love you, it's something to do with you. But often, actually, it's something to do with her. Why was she unable to give you love? Why was she unable to give it in a way that you actually needed it? So my mother, for example, provided lots of practical things. If you wanted somebody to produce a buffet for 30 people in central London and arrive half an hour early, my mother was the right person to ask. If you wanted her to listen to your emotions, she wasn't. So, first and foremost, you have to mourn the mother you didn't get. You need to find other places from within and without to get that emotions fulfilled, and it is a big task. I would say come to my workshop this afternoon about the mother wound, and I will go deeper into that. I'm being told I've got time, but I'm going to take it's time for me to go, but I'm going to take one last question beforehand. Yep, I think you've got the microphone. No? There's a gentleman in the middle there.
What do you think about my fear to die when I get very, very close to my girlfriend or too close to my girlfriend?
Well, first of all, I want to give you a great big thumbs up for actually acknowledging that and admitting that. That's the first thing I'd like to do. The next thing I'd like to do, I suppose, is get you to tell your girlfriend, actually, this is what's happening. It's not personal. It's about me. I think I'd like you to think about what she could do in those points that would be helpful. You know, do you want her to stand a certain distance away from you? Do you want her to hold you through those fears? Do you want to be able to talk about them? Next, I'd like to understand where they came from so that we could give some space for those fears, because fears tend to melt a little bit when they're given space. I would love you to be in a men's group where you talk to other men about their fears when they get really close to their wives. I would like you to have coping mechanisms, so you can say to her, I'm having these really strong feelings. I need 10, 15 minutes to go and walk around the block and just process them, and then I'm going to come back and tell you all about them. So it's a combination of going deep and actually understanding what these things are about, so that you understand yourself better. You communicate what you need clearly to your girlfriend, and the two of you can find ways for managing it. Because the minute you can actually talk to her about it, her emotions will go, ah. And if her emotions are going, ah, like that, yours are also going to be going down like that. But it all starts with you actually admitting it. So thank you very much for admitting it and talking about it here. Oh, and come to the Mother Wound workshop, because I would be more than prepared to put £10 million on the fact that it might have something to do with your mother. And it's weird. In men's space, we spend all this time talking about our fathers, and my question is, what was your mother doing while your father was doing all this stuff? We can possibly explore that, but thank you very much. Number 7. Oh, sorry. Number 7 is activate within what you didn't get from without. So I'd like you to give yourselves a great big round of applause for coming here and facing your fears.